Providence is the language of God. History is His story. The usual way the Lord speaks to us is through the present moment, the event. Occasionally He steps in and makes the event happen or unhappen in a strange way. We call it a miracle. What God does then is that He puts another cause in the process. Instead of cause and effect, leading to cause and effect, He jumps in and puts in another inexplicable cause, which is His own, and that becomes for us a miracle. But normally, God guides through secondary causes. Now, the secondary cause is Sean, who's had this inspiration to have a chapel here for the Holy Souls, and friendship has brought you together. It's a secondary cause, but God is the prime mover. So be open to that, because when you get an invitation from something which is holy, don't push it away. Normally it's God speaking, as the angel came to our Blessed Lady when she was precisely open, let it be, and it happened. Now this could be seen in the life of the saint of this day, Ignatius. Providence worked in a very surprising way. He was in a military career, big time. He wanted success, he wanted to be a star, and he was. But he was involved in the siege of Pamplona, and he was wounded quite badly. So he had to be out of service for a while and heal. They tried to reset his broken leg, and he wasn't amused because it was badly reset. He could hardly walk. So as a brave soldier he said, "Break it again." So they did. And the second healing wasn't much better either. So the rest of his life, though he was what he was, founder of a great order, he was limping physically. Didn't stop him being what he was. Now what actually happened was this. That moment in forced rest was providence for him, as could be the COVID in our time. He could do nothing, and he wanted to kill time. And in those days, they hadn't quite perfected mobile phones or computers, so he only had books, and he wanted something to make the adrenaline move, something exciting, romantic. What about this? They gave him 2 books, the only they had in the castle at the time. It was one, The Life of Jesus by a certain Carthusian, Ludovico, and the other, The Lives of the Saints. Boring. However, he had nothing to do, so he read them. And then he started to find, he could see heroic deeds in here, which was something akin to what he wanted, but in a different sphere altogether. So he placed himself with his imagination in the boots of St. Francis and of St. Dominic, and of these great giants who had marched into glory before him. And he compared that with the reactions he had from reading novels and romances of the past. He thought, this actually, although it's challenging and hurting, gives me an aftertaste, an afterglow of peace and warmth. And he liked the feeling. Whereas the other gave him sort of immediate adrenaline movement and then the blues. So he wasn't happy about that. And it was the beginning of what he was to maintain would be a key to discerning actually the action of the Spirit. Discernment of the spirits. He thought, and he was right, that the Lord was actually working at him through these secondary causes, books and their effects in the soul. And he saw, this actually is interesting, and he began to burn for the right side this time. And he gave himself to the Lord, and with it this baggage of finding how one discerns the movement of this newly found companion, Jesus Christ, in the soul. The beginning of the spiritual exercises, which are still with us to this day. Now, what happened? He was, a good middle-class man, but not really a star with regard to what was needed to do anything for Jesus Christ. He was a good soldier. He needed a certain baggage. So he started to master Latin, and he got a few degrees, the last of which was a Master of Arts in Paris. And there it all started to happen, because he was, despite his limp, a very interesting, flamboyant man. Now he was from the Basque area in Spain, and so that attracted people of the same ilk. Just happened to be that there were great future Jesuits there agglomerating. St. Xavier would be one of them. So anyway, they started to think together and do together. And they got as far as Venice, not sure what to do. They thought maybe we can conquer the Muslim world. Eventually they were ordained, I believe, at St. Mark's in Venice. There was a group of them, and they wanted to go to the Holy Land, that St. Francis had also done some centuries before. But there was nothing doing. The wind wouldn't blow in the right direction. It all depended on the wind in those days. So they had a second thought. Providence may be saying something else. Go closer to another place of pilgrimage, Rome, the eternal city. So the whole group went down to Rome and marched into the presence of the Holy Father. At your service, my Lord. And that was the beginning of what was going to be the model for all time. The Society of Jesus was to be the personal order of the Pope, with a fourth vow of obedience immediately to the Pope for the superiors. So that was negotiated under John Paul II because they wanted to remove it. He said, no, that's to stay. The Jesuit order was important for the Church, and he had to have the last word. Interesting. Now, of course, we have the first Jesuit Pope. And you still see, actually, if you look carefully at his motto, his shield, you've got the Jesuit emblem in there. It looks like IHS. It actually means Jesus. Because H in Greek is air, long E. So, this then was the beginning of what was going to be the army, especially from the Counter-Reformation onwards. Remember, Providence wanted to bring in an army to be a weight of heavy artillery against the bombardment coming from the newly formed Lutheran bloc and Calvinistic bloc. It started in Germany and then spread to other parts of Europe. Luther, it started with him. And this is exactly the same period. God, in his providence, was using, yes, even a siege from Pamplona and a cannonball to actually bring in a new kind of artillery to defend the church. And it worked. So much so, the Jesuits were a heavy nuisance politically in some parts of Europe because they were too effective. You know what they used to do? They'd aim hard, go to the future princes, be chaplains to kings, form the elite, and then you've got the whole country. It worked, and it still works actually. And so it was. By the way, we've got a recent canonized, is it beatified or canonized? John Sullivan, about a year ago. He's an Irish Jesuit. A good example, because they did everything, very good work. And you know what happened to him, little people? He was one day, he was actually an Anglican, and he had a movement of grace, and he became a Catholic, but then he heard something. He was in the middle of Dublin, and a child, about your age, said this, audibly, high-pitched voice, praying, "Father, please make John Sullivan a holy Jesuit priest." And the Lord worked through a secondary cause in the heart of the young man at that point and took it as a voice of an angel, but it was a child praying her prayers. And he took it from a voice from heaven, "I must be a Jesuit priest." And so he was, combining precisely what St. Ignatius gave to the order. Deep men of prayer. And you know how that worked? They exploded the whole structure, no choir, no conventional life as monks, no enclosure, but all was to happen invisibly. To take the place of the external structure of choir and so on, singing together, they had the internal structure of an obligation of an hour of mental prayer every day and a very strict novitiate of 2 years, which was perpetual vows, in which they died. They died on the level of the will. First of all, 30 days of discernment, and then 2 years of very strong formation in which they did what? They worked on all the levels of the person, in the imagination, in all the faculties of the will, and the body too, penance, and they worked in such a way that through the imagination, which used to be meditations, imagining Gospels, they worked on the will. They worked on all the faculties, and the will was worked upon so strongly that it didn't exist anymore. And they used to, in the will, get to the point where the will would not only execute and do what they were told, but also want to do what they were told for the reason that the superior was commanding it. So it was a supernatural vision in which they weren't saying, "but I will do it because it's the will of God," positively accepted. They saw a holy indifference. I don't exist, you can do with me whatever you want, Lord. So that gave the church people who were coming out of 14 years of formation, heavy brains, full of knowledge, out of a heavy formation of obedience, prayer, all this daily hours of mental prayer, like, if you like, coming out of a submarine, like powerful torpedoes that could be fired in any direction for the church. And they went to the farthest part of the world, the missions. You've seen the famous film The Mission, that was based in Latin America. They were Jesuits. So there they were, able to do anything. And of course in England, which was going towards Protestantism, they were there, underground. The whole underground Jesuit capillary system of sacraments, dangerously illegal. And of course they would track them down. And they would get information out of them. You know, the whole system they had, the hidey holes. Brother Little John, one of theirs, a brother who had, he was a genius for creating hidey holes for priests. And they still can't be found to this day, some of them, because they're so well constructed. They were just blending perfectly into the building. There the priests would hide. And they were caught sometimes. Edmund Campion, they tried to find him, he must be there, and they're giving up, we can't find him. So they went away, looked back, and they, oh, is that point there? There might be a hiding hole. Looked back, and they went back, and they knocked around, and he was there, crouching. So he was tortured terribly, put 3 times on the rack, and he still wouldn't talk. Eventually he was hanged, drawn and quartered, the punishment for traitors. They tried to get all the information about who the other ones were, but they wouldn't talk. So that's the army of Jesuits which suffered so that we could do what we're doing here. Just about, because the COVID makes a difference, doesn't it? We appreciate it more now. But as for you people, remember now, these Jesuits, they used to take people, and I hardly exaggerate, a little bit hardly, they used to make sure they had plenty of recruits. And what they used to do, yes, they do 30 days. So, yeah, a class full of young men, who were sort of 18 years old, 1821, first class, intellectual brains and scholars, and they would put them in 30 days of heavy, compressed meditations, 5 meditations a day, yes, with putting before them, you see, heaven and earth and all that went with it, all the choices they could make. It's called a retreat of election, and they would, under direction, with the Holy Ghost talking in their hearts, they would open up to a spiritual event and would pick up what the Holy Spirit was saying to their reactions in prayer, reactions of the soul. They would pick it up as rules for discernment. So they'd get to the end of 30 days, you see, in this heavily compressed meditations, and they would come to the end. Now, the director would say, we'll come to the end of our month of reflection. It's actually quite simple, gentlemen. You have before you, see, you have all eternity before you. It's quite simple. It's either hell or the Jesuits.